And we are live. Good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily, coming to you live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikulu.
Good morning. I'm blessed among men on this side of the divide. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television.
Sounds more like we are back to me. It's a brand new week. Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Indeed. Good morning from Abuja. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusuf.
Well, we're starting off this morning with politics, and that's because it affects you and I. It's one of the things that is actually universal, as it were. And I'm talking specifically about what's going on within the political parties. Just over the weekend, we saw candidates emerging from, the party primaries, especially for the state and the federal houses of assembly, as it were. And the big question we're trying to ask you this morning is just how involved are you in that process? Mind you, this is the big election before the bigger election. It is whatever comes out of this one that will determine what kind of leaders we'll have next year. So, questions for the delegates first, who will be doing a lot of the voting, the selection. What are the criteria the delegates are using to elect the candidates for the political parties? And, I mean, it should not be far-fetched. Issues of competence, governance, the pedigree of these aspirants should be what we look at to decide who we're electing as the candidates or the flag bearers, as they call it. So, again, we're reaching out, or at least appealing. We're not members of political parties. We're members of the fourth estate of the realm. But we're appealing to the delegates to, in good conscience, for the development of this nation, Nigeria, which is all ours, by the way. We need them to focus on the right issues. We've heard time and again the talk about, money bags or money being thrown around here and there. There was this advice given last week that, well, you can do whatever you want with that money, but ensure that you do the right thing with your conscience and with the conscience of, or at least for the conscience of this nation. So please, please, and please, for the political parties, the delegates, let us do right by our nation.
Well, you hit the bull's eye right there, Kayode. The issues should determine who emerges. It should inform what the delegates, do. It should inform the choice of the delegates and, how they elect or they determine who the candidate is for the presidential elections. Of course, for the other elections too, for the House of Assembly elections, for the Senate, senatorial elections, for the state assembly elections, But the news, definitive news and decisive news about who the candidates should be when the primaries will be conducted, is long in coming, particularly when you go by news that the certain political parties have postponed screening for their candidates for the second time. What is happening there? And it seems that there's a lot of kite flying, as far as the presidential primaries are concerned, when you hear news about northern delegates queuing behind a certain candidate, southern delegates queuing behind a certain candidate, and all of that. There seems to be a lot of time wasting, and it's understandable when you consider that you can't make 100 million naira investment and expect to make a loss. Add a lot of other millions of naira to that as well. But the more important thing that the political parties should remember is that beneath the interplay of interests, and the process of managing all those big interests, there is the interests, the national interest that is at work, the destiny of more than 200 million people. So it should go beyond who the highest bidder is, giving the candidacy to the highest bidder, but giving the candidacy to the man or woman with competency, integrity, and character.
I think I like the point you made, the man or woman. Speaking of the woman, Maokwe, your thoughts?
Well, I very little to add, because for a very long time we have stayed on this issue of zoning, which largely carries a lot of, it's good, but it's supposed to, help with a sense of fairness and justice. We have a lot of sentiment in politics, and a lot of people have said whether or not we like it, politics can sometimes be an emotional affair. And sometimes, people vote based on sentiments rather than what is actually on the ground before them. So I mean, I can only join, the voices this morning to say, let us appeal to the delegates. But I think that beyond appealing to delegates, perhaps in future, I mean, if people are not satisfied with the choices that they're left with, perhaps they should now begin to actively pursue. And I think that this advocacy has come a little too late, that people join political parties. Increasingly, we're seeing the need, and it's important to not just leave politics to politicians, that we all should be, well, not we all, not all of us can be political party members, but as many people as can be, I mean, as many people as whose profession allows them be members of political parties. Take an active interest in the local politics around you. See how you can influence that space. See how you can help make the decision. See how we're all now left at the delegates or at the mercy of the delegates. Well, I want to believe that there's been enough preaching to the delegates, and that, eventually, as one of our guests did say, if you must take whatever money they're given, by all means do take. Even though I hear now there's something very, there's a very corny side to it, almost sinister side, that now when some of the aspirants give money, they also request that you take an oath. So there is also that going on now. We've not been able to independently verify that, but this is what we have been told by those who should know. If you think that you can go down that route, I do not know if it is worth it. I do not think it is. I think that when you think about the stakes, that is what we have at stake in the 2023 election, the conscience and the future. I think it's very important that one of the most important primaries is happening on Children's Day on May 27. Think about the children when eventually you vote. Thank you.
And I think that's one of the things that I remember one of the candidates, I think it was Peter Obi, saying that when you select, think about the children, think about the future, think about generations to come. Very, very instructing counsel there. But, a number of things that would naturally want to come to our mind is, who are the delegates? Of course, we know the statutory delegates. We know who the super delegates are, if any of those constitutions of the political parties are there. But who are the other candidates selected from your ward, from your local governments? There are those who believe that we don't know them, that they come from different political parties. The last count, we understand that 3 will come from each local government. So who are the 3 that are going to come? Whose interests are they going to serve? Who are the people that are going to influence their choice? Of all of the people who are in the political parties at the ward level, thousands of them, and just 3. Who are these people? And what are the things that are going to determine who they are? What's the pedigree? What someone will do by what the person has done before, that's what we hear. But then, what are the things that are going to inform the choices of the delegates themselves and the choices that the delegates themselves will make eventually? So let's recognize, I remember what Governor Umahi said during our program yesterday, that, look, before there can be elections, there has to be a nation. So before we make those choices based on certain sentiments, let's think about the most important sentiment of all, the Nigerian sentiment. So again, the question, what's going to inform your choice? I guess that's hanging the balance. Kyle.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go on a quick break now. And when we return, we'll be taking a look at the dailies for you. It's been a very busy weekend and looks like an even busier week ahead. So stay with us. We'll show you what we have on the front pages. We'll start off with the Nigerian Tribune this morning. This is what you find on that front page. APC again aborts screening of presidential aspirants. Well, that's where we started off from as well, pages 3 and 4. Umahi Okorocha, others ask party to concede presidential ticket to Southeast. NAS, that's National Assembly, governorship aspirants angry with APC NWC. That's, of course, the National Working Committee. You see, Dimeji Bankole canvasses modified consensus to decide APC candidate. So that's a new one, modified consensus. You're wondering what that means. Pages 3 and 4 of the Nigerian Tribune has the details for you. As we said, it's going to be a very busy week within the political parties, and we got a taste over the weekend. Also on the front page, just on top of that one, you have this one. Electoral Act. 5 reasons Buhari has not signed amendment. Recall that amendment to, is it 84-8? The one that talks about the elected delegates and to have now the statutory delegates. It's been a back and forth. It's a very interesting one.
If the president will even take a first look, much less a second look at that.
You know, judging from how we've seen the president approach some of these bills. I mean, the first time he took him, he exhausted in 30 days. So,
and that's for extra time?
You know, and the parties don't have 30 days, as it seems. In fact, those primaries don't have 30 days. But
the National Assembly is very confident that the president is going to sign it before, especially before the presidential primaries.
I mean, do you see what happens before boxing matches, before football matches?
Please tell us.
How they say, you know, I'm going to win that match. You know, I'm winning that match. And after the match, you see the guy lying on the...
Especially, that comes a little more interesting when you consider the fact that the president frowned at 84-12. Now, you amended 84-8. 84-12 is still in that proposition. And that's why I said, will he even take a first, much less a second look?
Are you talking about do me, I do you kind of thing?
I didn't say any. I'm just raising questions.
Okay. I'm liking this. But take a look at the writers to that one. President pressured to delay signing for tenure elongation. PDP alleges amendment of Electoral Act, or to Electoral Act, on delegates illegal. That's coming from Senior Advocate Falana, saying from another lawyer, it can be done, says Ubani. So, again, lots of permutations around that one. And I think this is actually a major deal breaker for the political parties. It's a big one. It looks like it's very little, just one subsection, but it's a major one.
It requires a small signature, right?
Just that make Omar's signature. A couple of other stories on the front page. You see Nigerian dealers turn to accidented cars for profit. That's of a rising cost of vehicles. And this is something that has been rampant for a while. I even saw this particular report about, you know what, let's not get into that. A couple of other stories on the front page, but this is actually something we should pay attention to. If those vehicles are accidented, who's checking whether they are roadworthy? Because some of these dealers they touch the car up, as they say, and you don't even know the car was accidented. Sometimes the airbags are bad, so what happens if you have a collision? Sometimes major parts are rusted. They come from snowy areas where they have to put salt on the road. So it's a major one. I wish we can pay more attention to it. But that's the Nigerian Tribune for you this morning.
And from the Nigerian Tribune, we move to the Daily Trust this morning. And the Daily Trust also leads with politics. The big story says, aspirants, regional leaders in final push. Let's see if the writers will provide an insight into what the big story is. Southwest moves to produce consensus candidate. Buhari to meet ruling parties, governors, contenders. Southeast contenders meet also, vow to support aspirant from zone. Abuja hotels fully booked. Uncertainty as APC postpones screening of aspirants. You see, that's it there. Southwest in a major push. Southeast also in a major push. So what's going to happen? How will these interests be managed ahead of, is it May the 27th now?
The question on my mind on that one is this the fear of INEC is the beginning of wisdom? Or the fear of the Electoral Act? Who is the puppeteer now? I don't know.
Well, I think it's actually both, because INEC has, well, they've said they're not postponing, but they could if they, but I mean, there's a timetable. So it's more the Electoral Act, which will, of course, be enforced by INEC and other enforcers. There you go.
You know, but all these were in full view well ahead of the signing of the Electoral Act.
Exactly.
So a lot more preparation should have been done.
Yeah.
The back and forth is really not impressive, if you ask me.
True.
Okay, let's go to the top corner of the Daily Trust. How aspirants throng Katsina for Yar'Adua's mother's blessing. Besides going to the traditional rulers, mothers of presidents are also giving blessings.
It's like a pilgrimage of sorts. I've seen so many aspirants visit
the mother of the former president.
Yeah, so it's a presidential mother's blessing.
I think we should take a closer look at that. The blessing.
Is it because it's going to happen on Children's Day that they're going to a mother?
Oh, wow.
I'm just...
Oh, wow.
We're just wondering this
Another
morning.
angle. There you go.
Okay, cryptocurrency. That's also on the top corner of the Daily Trust. Sex guidelines unfavorable to Nigerians. You'll find that story on page 22 of the Daily Trust. And you can't ignore the pictures on the front pages of the Daily Trust. They speak to building collapses that occurred in some parts of Nigeria.
South Africa, actually.
Yes, South Africa, actually. But you know, that's another big issue in Nigeria currently. There's a major shake-up in the housing sector, and the authorities are not resting on their oars in that regard. There's a lot of demolition of structures built on floodplains and, you know, under power lines in Abuja and in Kogi. There was also another building collapse recorded in Lagos over the weekend.
Yes.
I think, you know, what do they call them now? Estate surveyors?
Oh, right.
No.
The usual
developers. Yes,
yeah.
developers should be more professional and more circumspect in their building choices and their approaches to building plans.
Well, that should. I want to believe that that's not going to be allowed to just slide, because it's quite a big issue. Converting a bungalow to a multi-story building, it definitely isn't something we should wink at.
Absolutely. Well, that's the Daily Trust this morning. Ayo.
Flip to the Leadership newspaper this morning. By the way, on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper as well, you find that story of INEC saying, look, we're not going to shift this, otherwise there'll be consequences. Leadership newspaper this morning leads with 2023, postponement of APC presidential screening unsettles aspirants. Find that story on page 4. No new date for exercise yet as president meets with aspirants on Wednesday. Jonathan's name pops up again in APC presidential permutations. May get party's waiver to run.
Who is popping the name, please? Who is popping this name? Just
Saudi's presidential aspirants meet in Abuja, forge alliance. Any breach during party primaries will invalidate entire process. INEC warns. Whoa, someone has X-rays on the processes right now just to ensure nothing untoward happens. Right above the nameplate, Electoral Act. APC is talking crisis to stall 2023 elections. That's an allegation by the PDP. Deborah can hold peaceful protest in states. FCT. Find that story on page 6 of the paper this morning. FG appoints Chukwunyere Waboku as acting accountant general, among other stories you'll find on the front page of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Marco?
Well, let's take a look at what the Abuja Inquirer has for you. And they focus, of course, largely on what is happening here in the FCT. Nothing to smile about in the headlines there. Abuja, week of chaos, confusion, tension heightened over day-to-day conflict. Protests over chairman, tenure elongation, that one's more political. Minister under fire. So you have all of the stories on page 3 of the paper for you. Quite a lot to expect right here in the FCT, and it seems that there is still some undertones of maybe all has not been quelled in the wake of the I'm looking for the right words to use now. In the wake of the conflict that we saw at the day-to-day market, that's where building materials are sold. And if you think that Abuja also has a really huge real estate sector, that actually has very big implications for the economic sector here in Abuja. So there'll be questions as to what's going to happen. And in this week, It's also the week that, you know, we're expecting lots of delegates right here in the Federal Capital Territory. So a lot to chew on when you flip to page 3 of the paper. Look at this. Mbappe leaders SOS to FCTA. Rescue Mbappe tourism site from criminals. There's also that story on page 11 for you. In Borno, Amechi promises to end insurgency. Plateau APC adopts him as sole candidate. The story is on page 3. They have a number of other stories just beneath the nameplate. Trademore Estate. FCTA says 70 more buildings to go. Abuja indigents demand additional seats in NAS. That agitation has been on for quite a while. You'll find all of the details on page 5 of the paper. Let's leave it there for the paper.
Well, take a look at the Daily Times now. The Daily Times, of course, leads with politics. APC stuck in political crisis to stall 2023 poll. I didn't say that. That's coming from the People's Democratic Party, and you may have seen that across the dailies this morning. Asks ruling party to perish tenure elongation plot. Accusation fake news, says APC, postpones presidential screening exercise. So again, this tenure elongation allegation comes up. The president has spoken to it time and again, and well, it's right there for you. Under that one, you see in blue, audit query, House committee probes multi-million-dollar debt owed FG. So, wonder what the direction is. The FG owes, and now someone is owing the FG. So you imagine how the FG is going to treat the person owing it, because clearly the FG has to, you know, service its debt. So.
You know, it's interesting, you know, when you talk about that, because is it the FG that is being owed? Is it the federal government that is being owed, or the federation? Remember that
there's actually a difference, right?
Okay.
Well, I think at this point, it's usually the FG. The FG is the federation is the FG.
Oh, really?
But I think it's a conversation we need to have, especially because time and again we've gotten promises from candidates saying when we come in, we're going to ensure that we have, you know, federated units, things work well, structure or restructure. So yeah, I'm glad you raised that up.
And it may be a thing of semantics, really. The House also is speaking for itself as a part of the federation.
Right? There you go. So the linguists have taken this up. Let's leave it there for the Daily Times newspaper.
And from the Daily Times newspaper, let's go to the News Direct this morning. The News Direct leads thus: APC postpones presidential screening exercise indefinitely. What do the writers say? Borno's delegates will vote for Buhari's choice, their convictions. Well, that's coming from the governor of Borno, Professor Babagana Zulum. That's where I'm not clear. You know, this speaking from both ends of the mouth in many cases where politicians are concerned. How are they voting? Their choice or President Buhari's choice?
Maybe saying some will vote for President Buhari's choice, some will vote for their conscience. And in this case, their conscience might be the president's choice.
It reminds me of, we have decided to throw the ticket open, but then again, we could also consider the consensus option.
It's politics.
Leave all the options open. But I think more importantly, I mean, it should be your conscience. The president has said he will not divulge who his preferred candidate is, except he will be breaking that promise. So I imagine that he will not be divulging.
And some people are saying that this is the president's anointed candidate, or anointed choice,
people
not
go
candidate
to meet
now.
The president, I say, well, I've spoken with the president, and I've gotten his. You know how these things go. But.
And there are those who are wondering, is there a joker in the offing? Okay. You were saying something?
Yes, it's the News Direct this morning. The second rider says, as APC professionals meet Omishiri to organize retreat for party's aspirants. This is a good time to be a politician. It's not just the delegates, you know, having that bazaar kind they keep talking about. Even the aspirants too are being treated
well,
to
I always put bazaar before the bazaar. Anyway, just to show that it isn't the way to go.
Okay, some other stories might interest you from the front page of News Direct this morning. Let's go to the top corner and see how things are doing. FG slams new tax on telephone calls. There you have it. You're not just paying additional on VAT, you're also getting to be taxed on your telephone calls. Well, we'll see how that goes. One of these days will be a conversation we'll have. The middle story on the top corner of News Direct says, no plan to withdraw Naira notes from circulation. That's coming from the CBN. Osun 2022. I'm not for fire politics. That's coming from the incumbent and candidate of the APC, Boyega Uyitola. That's the news direct for you this morning.
Well, let's see how many more we can quickly run through. There's the Guardian and there's the Vanguard here. Anxiety hits APC over regional consensus, delegate stalemate. There's also this, Southeast APC aspirants agree on regional consensus speak. Ohaneze woos APC PDP delegates to vote Igbo aspirant. You have a number of other riders, quite a very lengthy one. Everything you see in blue there are the riders to that particular story. You also see the pictures. Each one of them worth 1,000 words at least. Despite failed bid by telcos to hike tariffs, phone calls to attract new tax regime. So it looks like there's going to be an increase in terms of how much you pay for tax on each phone call that you make. You'll find all of the details somewhere inside the Guardian newspaper. And the Vanguard has this one for you. Why Buhari is not signing Electoral Act. That's according to sources. Opts for moral high ground. APC leaders behind delay. That's according to the PDP. APC keeps mum his right to refer bill for checks. Bankole canvasses modified consensus to decide APC candidate. You find all of the stories tucked inside the paper. Your Mr. and Mrs. is on the front page. But look at this very disturbing story. Beheaded Anambra lawmaker. Soludo in shock offers 10 million naira bounty on killers. The story is on page 15 for you. And then they also have this. In case you're wondering what your power supply has been like and what's responsible for it, electricity generation drops by 7% to 3,284 megawatts. The story is on page 35. Let's leave it there for the Vanguard newspapers.
Well, that's it with a look at the front pages this morning, but we're just getting started. We're starting off with a topic that has been staring us in the face, and over the weekend we got a rude shocker from Anambra. We're still recovering from what happened in Kaduna, the figures, but that's in a moment. You don't want to miss this. Stay with us.
I also want to reassure members of the public that the propaganda or this issue of Kaduna cannot be accessed either by road, by air, or by train. It's not true. The road is safe for motorists to follow, and we'll try our best to keep the road safe.
That promise of safety on the Abuja-Kaduna highway has been broken yet again, as terrorists in their numbers have brazenly struck again, taking an unspecified number of persons captive. At about 4:20 p.m. on Tuesday, the terrorists struck, blocking the Audogbe portion of the highway near Katari village and intercepted some vehicles. In the process, they took dozens of travelers away, and 24 hours, no word from the abductors. Channels Television contacted the police, and here is the response of the spokesman of the Kaduna State Police Command. Quote, "I can confirm to you that some terrorists blocked the highway and took away unspecified number of persons. The command has already swung into action and has deployed personnel in search of the terrorists with a view to rescuing the abductees." End of quote. The Abuja-Kaduna highway has been notorious for incessant terrorist attacks. In November last year, bandits struck along the same axis and abducted an unspecified number of persons. Before that attack, there were reports of various abductions on that same route, making it a nightmare for travelers using that corridor. The latest attack comes barely 2 months after 8 people were killed and about 60 persons still held captive after an attack on an Abuja-Kaduna bound train by the terrorists.
Two gentlemen join us this morning to look at some of the issues Kade mentioned just before we took the break. Agiole Abe is a retired commissioner of police, a former commissioner of police in Kaduna State, pioneer commandant, Mobile Police Training College in Osun State, as well as former Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations, Anambra Command. He joins us along with Zubair Abdul Rauf, who is Community Leader, Burning Gwari, Kaduna State, and former Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer, Kaduna State Media Corporation, KSMC, Radio and Television between 2002 and 2008. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Mr. Abe, let me begin with you. We hope we'll be able to get one or two other persons to join us this morning in this conversation. But you have served in Anambra State, Mr. Abe, and there are those who are still as shocked as one can imagine exactly what is happening in Anambra State. First of all, at the time you got this news, how did it come to you?
Thank you for having me on this program. Yeah, I served in Anambra State as the Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations, and we had a lot of challenges, but we were able then to solve a lot of these security challenges. I can say that, and it's on record, but that was the period one of the most notorious criminal in Anambra State was arrested, Ifaku. And this incident, as a matter of fact, came to me as a shock. I knew there were some level of criminalities in the state, but the extent at which it was pushed was so shocking. The beheading of the lawmaker, and I think time has come for the talking to stop, and we should initiate actions.
When
this
you talk,
man,
yeah, just a quick one. This man, please go ahead, complete the thought.
This man, each time I read from the pages of newspaper and they said unknown gunmen, I keep asking myself, where are these unknown gunmen coming from? They come from within the society. This war is now supposed to be carried on by the general public within these communities, because these men cannot come to cause havoc and disappear into the same community, and they are accepted and they live their normal life. So their time has come for us to really take action as a community and the people.
What kind of action would you be proposing? Because there are those, for instance, the chairman of the Southeast Governors Forum, Governor Umahi, was saying that, you know, he thinks that this is largely politically motivated, some of the issues that are going on now. The victim that we're talking about, for instance, you know, we understand just picked up a form to return to the House of Assembly in the same state, and then this. So one is wondering, in your opinion, and from what you have seen, perhaps the few information that you may have been able to pick up, is this politically motivated or just sheer criminality?
We should be able to differentiate between political killings and criminalities. As far as I'm concerned, let's look at the basis for the activities of these groups within the Southeast. They intend to create fear. And one of the sources you can create fear is to take it to the people in government. And I think as soon as they succeed in doing this, they try to establish their presence within the community. And I don't look at it wholly as a political killing, because there are a lot of political activities going on, and this is just one way they send their warning to the community that we can reach you whoever you are. I think we should stop associating a lot of these criminalities with politics.
Whether it is politically motivated or not, which we've not been able to establish, government has in the past several times pointed accusing fingers at the proscribed IPOB. And IPOB has said, look, we're not responsible for the killings in the Southeast. We're not responsible for the attacks. During your time as police commissioner in Anambra, perhaps you had made arrests. In which direction did your investigations point at? Did it absolve IPOB more often than not of guilt in much of the attacks in the southeast, particularly in Anambra, where you served?
I served in Anambra as the Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations. And the activities of this group was, I can say, much checked. Then it was more of MASOB, not IPOB, during our time in Anambra State. It was more of IPOB, and we took the war to them. And so we were able to keep them completely away from the city centers, and they were restricted within the forest areas. And periodically, we carry on patrols and checks with a joint military exercise to this area. So I think between the 2011, 2012, and 13 that I left, the activities of these hoodlums was completely checked.
Now, with the new governor's approach, meeting with the leader of the proscribed group, upon assumption of office, he offered amnesty to the groups and, opened the door to dialogue. Yet, the attacks have not stopped. In fact, we have seen the killings heighten, especially over the weekend. What is this signaling as far as whether the events, the insecurity in Anambra in the southeast are politically motivated or not?
I think we are not negotiating in the position of strength. We are giving them opportunity to present their own cases. These people are hoodlums, they are criminals, and honestly, successive government has tried to call them to table and talk to them, but it's not working. We should, discourage ourselves from talking to these criminals. They are criminals. The law does not allow
Mr.
us to
Abe, who are
negotiate
criminals? Please be clear.
These hoodlums. Anybody that goes to the street with arms, kill at will, honestly, the Constitution does not favor that, and they are criminals.
Are you saying members of the group, the proscribed group, are criminals?
Not the proscribed group. These people are identified as the IPOB, the MASOB, are groups that are fighting for a presumed cause, but they are telling you we are not the ones doing this. And I believe that too, that they are not the ones doing it. The criminals hiding behind these groups should be treated as such. IPOB has consistently told you that they are not the one carrying out these killings. They have come out to say so, and we believe that they are not the ones. So whoever is doing it are not IPOB or MASOB. They are criminals and should be treated as such.
Well, it will seem as though, IPOB gives out that statement, but whether or not the government believes or at least holds that true is another thing entirely. But we'll come to our other guest in a moment. But I'd like you to speak to the MO that we have seen in recent times, the abduction, then the beheading, and then displaying, either doing a video of it, of the process, or putting, the severed head right there in public. Looking at that MO, what do you see? What do you think this is all about?
Barbarism in the modern century, barbarism, and that should not be supported by any individual. That is one of the worst crimes ever committed in this country, honestly. And I think the law enforcement agencies in that state should go after the perpetrators of this act and bring them to book. This is not supposed to happen in this century at all.
But what is that meant to achieve? I mean, you have seen some of these things over time. What do you think that is meant to achieve? And I imagine that there maybe should be a counter-narrative from the authorities or from the stakeholders. So what is it meant to achieve? What kind of counter-narrative should we be putting out there so we don't, lose this war on that, at least the propaganda or the psychological warfare mentality?
And that is exactly what these perpetrators of this act want to convey to the society. Create total fear within the public, and so that their presence could elicit some kind of serious fear. And I think this is the point at which the government should act and act decisively to kind of reassure the members of the public that we're on top of the game.
All right, let's take this to Mr. Abdurrauf, because what we're seeing, the security challenges, it's not just in the southeast, it's not just in Anambra, Imo, and others. We've also seen this pervasive, especially in the northwest. We were shocked by the statement, well, maybe some weren't, but the statement made by the governor of Kaduna State about, terrorists, is it the Boko Haram, the ISWAP, and the Ansaru finding a safe haven in Kaduna. Now, that's an area where at least you are familiar with. It's sort of home to you. But I'd like you to speak to the figures that came out. 360 people killed in the first 3 months. Breaking down that's 120 per month. That's 4 people killed every day. Is this normal?
Well, the situation is not that normal. If you look at even the figures, some of us that come from Pernongwari area, and also some part of Giwa local government area, where we consider as the epicenter of these armed banditry, kidnappings, and what have you. We look at even the figures are very minimal, because when you look at what is happening on a daily basis, there was a time that in a single day, more than 30 people were killed. And I think the information didn't even reach even the authorities. So some of these killings may happen, but the reportage of the event will not reach the security personnel or the government at that time. So if you look at the whole scenario of all these banditry and also kidnappings that have been happening and the security situation generally in Kaduna State, we can say that we have reached a precarious situation that we cannot be able, to say what ways are we going to curtail these, problems that emanated from all these terrorist groups. If you look at what is happening, the IGP said, the Abuja-Kaduna highway is being under surveillance. Yes, I agree it's under surveillance, but there are some bad spots in which there must be, a kind of a pin down where we can have, the security personnel there. And that is why the moment, this convoy of security patrolling the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway, the moment they pass that area, so some of these bandits will take advantage of that and will come out and cause havoc. So therefore, you see, there must be, a kind of strategy from this security agency, to stop this madness. Honestly, 360 in 3 months, that is 4 people per day, when you look at it averagely, is on a very high side. And when you are looking at other areas, the remote areas where this issue happened, the southern Kaduna area, and also this part of Kaduna State, particularly Benongwari and Giwa, it is something that needs, the presence of this security personnel. So also, there is a problem that also is coming up, the Ansaru of a thing. If you look at Giwa and Benongwari, the Ansaru presence and dominance is still there. Nobody knows their motives. In some areas, the Ansaru are patrolling the roads, and you see them with their arms, with even the military fatigue and what have you. So if you look at it, you won't know their mission. And some of the locals, they feel, secured with this Ansaru of a thing, and that's why some of them have been cajoled into all this, terrorist group and what have you. So also, lack of a kind of strategy from the security personnel, and that's what aggravates the problem of insecurity, right, and also these figures that we are seeing.
Mr. Abdurrauf, are you saying that Ansaru has taken a foothold. Essentially, they are in charge of those areas, because if they're patrolling in military fatigue, then it will speak a lot about just how much free hand they have to move. Are you saying they are in charge of those communities?
Definitely they are in charge. If you go from Maganda in Bernungwari local government to Old Bernungwari up to Fontua, you will see these people, and even if you have a problem and your vehicle breaks down, these people will come to your aid, will help you to jack up your car, remove the tire, take it to a vulcanizer in a nearby village, and also come and fix it. And even some of them will give you water and they will tell you bye-bye. They will not say anything to you. The Ansaru are in charge of this road, and if they spot any armed bandit, let me use, the word, although, any Fulani bandits they saw along that road, they chase them away. So they are in charge of that road. Presently, I'm talking to you, that is how that road is. And that road is more secured than Kaduna to Bernungwari, because the Ansaru were in charge of that Bernungwari football road. And that is why you have them. They are very, very prominent. They are very prominent in Bernungwari area, in the eastern part of Bernungwari, and some part of Giwa local government, notably in 6 wards of Giwa local government, notably Kidandan, Galadimawa, Kadage, Yakawada, and to some extent Panhoya. These are the places that you find this Ansaru. And also you have the bandits on the other side who are on the forest of UAC forest, where they have their farms.
Let me get this right, Mr. Abdurauf. So you're saying that Ansaru, which is a terrorist group, am I right?
Yes.
So you're saying that, 1, they are in charge, 2, they're providing security for the communities such that they are now the ones fighting against the bandits. Am I right?
Yes.
Are the people okay with this? Do they like this arrangement?
Well, the people, are taking it. It's just like a kind of, it's a situation whereby this one is a devil. You prefer a devil than also, to have, somebody that will come and, molest you or even take over, your community. This Ansaru present, as I'm telling you, is very, very prominent. Everybody who follow that road will feel secured, but the locals there, they are being indoctrinated into this kind of ideology of this splinter group. So that is what is happening in the whole of eastern part of Bernungwari, from Maganda, as I said, to Old Bernungwari, to Kuyalo, to Dogwandawa, to Kazage, and also Kutemeshi. Therefore, you go to Idaso Ward in Giwa local government area, and also some part of Kidandan Ward, you find all these, terrorists, there. And the people feel more secured to be with those terrorists, Ansaru, than with the bandits.
It's a very dangerous situation. I'm just wondering if people understand the long-term implication, even though there are questions as to what really the people will be able to do by themselves.
Yes, it's a very dangerous situation, but they don't have, a choice. Because these bandits overrun communities. Always, they overrun these communities. But with the coming of the Ansaru, the people were given protection, because even some of the places where all the security are being, stationed, they are only stationed in some areas, but they cannot be able to go into those places where, the terrain is very difficult, is mountainous, and a thick forest in those areas. And that is why the locals now, take, the doctrine of devil advocate is preferably they feel secured with the bandit than than any other things, because they are being given protection, which, our security personnel are not given that kind of protection. And that is why these people, prefer, the Ansaru to give them protection than to remain what they are, to be overrun by these armed bandits, terrorist armed bandits.
Are they aware of what the long-term implication of that could be?
Well, even if they're aware of what is the long-term implication, because right now, you wouldn't know what sort of agenda or what motives is the Ansaru have in those areas. Because they are there, they don't do anything to the locals, and what they are doing is to give protection to these locals and also to chase out all those terrorists that are overrunning communities in those areas, whereby the communities are helpless. So therefore, it is better, to hold a double-edged sword than to wait to be overrun by bandits. And they prefer to take this lesser evil, so-called lesser evil, Ansaru, than to be overrun by these, armed bandits that are terrorizing communities in those areas.
Perhaps I should ask, what are your own fears? What do you think could be the long-term implication of this?
The long-term implication, because they are recruiting the locals into their own ideology. So therefore, and these people are armed, and the armed, when they are armed, they are being taught, a certain doctrine, which is away from the normal Islamic, doctrine that we can see. So in the long term, you see, these people will come out with their real motives. At the end of it all, these people that have been cajoled into joining the Ansaru group will now take charge or even, go against their own communities. That will be the long-term implication.
And it's very dangerous. Let me quickly throw this now to Mr. Abbey. As we see in Kaduna, we also have an equally complex situation in Anambra. This is especially as, we continue to see denials by IPOB that this is not them. Whatever is happening in Anambra is not them. Who do you think... Because all of this started, sit at home, some violence in the southeast seemed to have started on the back of agitations. We saw it in Imo, we've seen it in Anambra, parts of Ebonyi have experienced it, even some parts of Abia. But right now it seems that Anambra is the one under focus. Who do you think has a responsibility to say, you know what, we've looked at it and these are truly not IPOB agitators? Do you think that this should be the IPOB trying to prove that they're not the ones, or do you think that it should be the state trying to sift wheat from chaff?
Thank you, Malbe. I think time has come that we should view things in its real perspective. The MASOB and IPOB, they have consistently come out to say, look, we are not the ones doing this. And this agitations has lingered on for quite a long time. I think high time we sit back and consider doing some of the needfuls. Since these people are unknown and they appear to be presenting a front before the government and saying this violence, we are not the one creating it. We are for social reasons. I think we need to reconsider one issue and examine whether or not they actually have a genuine case and invite them to a table where we can discuss and resolve this issue once and for all, to avoid this bloodletting and some other groups come in the name of IPOB or myself and creating havoc in the communities. I think
What I find disturbing is there's a conversation, Mr. Abe, if I may. I mean, there's a conversation already ongoing. We've seen moves by the current governor who has said from day one that he believes that there should be negotiation. He has visited the leader of the group, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, in DSS custody. And Nnamdi Kanu has also said that, he doesn't think that the way he doesn't think that that is IPOB doing those kinds of things. And if that is, that they should stop those kinds of things. Negotiations are currently ongoing, but the killings are not abating. That's the troubling part of it. What I'm wondering is, shouldn't we be seeing a collaboration between, IPOB and the state agents to actually fish out those who are, perpetrating this evil in the Southeast?
I do believe, too, that should be done because sometimes we look at the sincerity of government in doing certain things. And I think these IPOB members are human beings and they belong to the Southeastern region. And if they are convinced that the government is honest and sincere about this move, I think they will come forward to resolve this issue.
In the meantime, what do you think? Because right now we're not clear on the motives of these people. Communities are being attacked. This is not kidnapping for ransom. This is kidnapping to make a statement. The lawmaker who was kidnapped, his head was reportedly found in a motor park. You have to ask, what exactly is the motive? There have been all manner of gory... What exactly... Most times when criminals commit a crime, oftentimes there is some benefit, which accrues to them. For those who are rapists, they have their own benefits. For those who are kidnappers, one could see economic benefit. For those who are armed robbers, you could see the economic implications of that. But for this group of people, what precisely do they stand to benefit?
To create fear, to make the people submit to them. Fear is the greatest benefit such organization can achieve, to create fear. If they can go to the extent to kill such a highly placed individuals in the community, I think they have been able to establish themselves in that community, and they are going to now be in perpetual control of their community, and the people must now do exactly what they want to be done. If we say don't go into politics, don't go into an election campaign, if you do, this is going to be exactly what will happen to you. They've been able to...
Really big questions.
Great fear.
I think it's important to state at this point that we try to get the Deputy Superintendent of Police and Police Public Relations Officer, Mr. Ikenga Tochukwu, who did say that he was going to join us on the program. We're still expecting that he will join us on the program. That's the Police Public Relations Officer for the Anambra State Police Command. At least to give a clearer view of what exactly is happening in Anambra State, and perhaps reassure the people, because there are questions as to, even going about business on a day that is not, regarded as a sit-at-home day. There are questions as to whether ordinary, is this targeted at politicians alone? We're yet to get him. We're hoping that Mr. Ikenga Tochukwu will still join us at some point in this conversation. But let's take a moment right now, and then when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Please stay with us. But still taking on the general topic of insecurity across the different parts of the country, and we still have with us Mr. Agiole Abe, who is a retired commissioner of police, and also joining us via Zoom is also Mr. Zubair Abdurauf, who is the community leader, Beningwari in Kaduna State, and also former managing director, CEO of Kaduna State Media Corporation. Mr. Abe, let me quickly ask you, you've heard the submissions of Mr. Abdurauf, and I'm sure that you must be worried about what is happening in Kaduna. The governor is currently suggesting that communities along the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway be relocated. Do you think that could be a probable solution to solving the constant kidnappings that we see along the Abuja-Kaduna highway?
Thank you so much, Amape. I think I listened to the governor too, and I want to believe that he was not properly being understood, or out of the seriousness of the issue, he came up with these options. But I think, with respect to Governor El-Rufai, I think it wasn't a good approach to resolving this community problem. These people, by accident of birth, happen to come from that geographical location. And because of failure of government actions, we can no longer safeguard and protect these people. They deserve to be protected. Instead of relocating them, we should provide them all the needed protection they can. It's quite important now that we have identified a particular area of the criminal elements operating. This is the more reason we should now draw up strategies to ensure that this community is safe from this form of criminalities coming into their communities. So I don't think it is properly placed to relocate a community because of a crime. And the community is not so large to the extent that we cannot police. I think we have a good reason to police that community effectively so that these criminals will not have access to that community.
Mr. Abe, let's return to the point about political motivation. And during the break, we took a quote by one of the governors from the Southeast who said that these boys think they will profit if the APC government fails. And, you know, to add to that, another governor of the Southeast has said that the killings, you know, the insecurity, the unrest is politically motivated. He, in fact, threatened to name those behind, politicians behind the attacks in the Southeast. But then again, they don't go ahead to make good their threat. Do politicians help the situation if they go about the insecurity in the Southeast this way, you know, by projecting that indeed they are aware of those behind the killings, and then nothing really comes out of, you know, the political talk?
I think they should stop politicizing these issues. If politicians know exactly those who are perpetrating these killings, they should come out and name them instead of keep putting people in suspense. Name the criminals, identify them so that we should be able to know exactly which people are causing unrest in the Southeast. And we should stop this issue of we know them and at the end we hear nothing about it. Like I said, honestly speaking, time has come for us to identify a particular group that are championing a cause, legitimate cause. Because there are times you must have a ceasefire in a war situation. The IPOB, the MASOB, but each time I ask, who are we negotiating with? We should be negotiating with the leaders of a particular group. And you see, this issue will not have a headway in as long as they believe that their leader is in incarceration and you are negotiating for for them to cease some of these hostilities. I think we should really, really think about what should be done in the Southeast to remedy this crisis from escalating to a more broader issues.
Speaking of what should be done, it was said during the Southeast Regional meeting with Mr. President just about some weeks ago that if that political representation at the center, which is the age-long cry of the Southeast region, if it is realized in 2023, peace will become a reality in the Southeast. If this is achieved, do you think that it will happen?
I think this is not just all about them actualizing the 2023 ambition. It's about fairness. I think if the Southeast people believe that they are fairly treated, I think we will see a downtrend in some of these hostilities. But for now, we should be able to really examine whether or not they actually have a case. Are these people actually fairly treated? Their complaints, are they genuine? When we begin to examine this, and they will now begin to consider the position of their leadership. Honestly, I do not believe that the people whose leader is incarceration will want to negotiate properly with you. So I think we should review the position of their leader who is in incarceration and see exactly what we can sit on the table to discuss with him about. And because we've been on this issue for quite some time, trying to negotiate. The central government in the Southeast have been trying to speak with their leaders. But at this stage we must face realities and look at exactly who are we discussing with. And I think we should consider discussing with their leader.
Cogent questions there. Who are we discussing with, and what are their agitations? Would you be discussing without their leader on the table as well? I'd like to bring my next poser to you, Mr. Zubair. And you said a number of interesting things, and Mawpe also asked you about implications. Are you getting a sense that even though the state government also acknowledged the very real presence of Ansaru in Kaduna, are you getting a sense that the state government is helpless in the face of the presence of Ansaru in Kaduna, even though you tell us that they are helping to keep the peace in some parts of the state?
Well, let me go back to what my colleague has just said. If you look at the situation, the state government is rather helpless, because when you look at the situation, the state government does not control the security apparatus. Whatever the state government will do, it has to go in line with the national security agenda, or what the national security programs that the government have to curtail these problems of armed banditry, or also the insecurity general in Kaduna State and the neighboring Kaduna State. And so also, if you look at the whole situation, it is not about politics. You look at the situation on the ground. One, the complicity among the locals, and also the government inaction are also on the other side. So when you look at the government inaction and also the complexity among the locals, and which the locals does not have any other option rather than to align themselves with this Ansaru group to have protection, because the government is not protecting them. This is what is happening, particularly where the Ansaru are more dominant, particularly in two local government areas of Birnungwari and Giwa local government areas. So therefore, what is to be done now is to look at all those problems that emanating from all these areas, and also to look at the failures, of both the communities and also the government on the other side, to be able to bring out, a kind of, action plan to deal with the situation. So therefore, if you look at it, when you look at even the Ansaru of the thing that you're talking about, it is not only in Bernungwari, even the last, train attack that, that made a lot of people, abducted. And up to now, nobody knew, that Ansaru has infiltrated into those areas. Therefore, what the state government is saying, or the government of Rufai is saying, that those communities living along Abuja, Kaduna Highway need to be relocated so that, the armed personnel should take over those areas. Because those are the dangerous areas of Katari, Irijana.
Mr. Abdurrauf, let me just quickly ask you. You said something that you said nobody knew that there is an infiltration of the Ansaru that you mentioned to the magnitude that we have. But you also said the other time that it's something everybody knows is happening. So how come it sounds like doublespeak to me? Because, I mean, if you say no one knew that there is such a magnitude of infiltration, is that to say that the security agencies themselves are not aware?
Well, the security agency, is not, when I'm saying that is, when you look at, the presence of this Ansaru, it started like a joke, that the Ansaru are having, a kind of clash between them and these armed bandits or terrorists, as we may call them. So you see, the locals thought that this Ansaru who came in form of, trying to put people to be more knowledgeable in their religious activities, they now turn, to be fighting some people who are overrunning communities. What I'm saying is the magnitude of this thing is nobody knew that Ansaru can be able to travel from where they are located to even this part that, that the Kaduna State is contemplating of relocating those communities of Akelebu and what have you. So the most dangerous part of it is because of lack of, a kind of political will on the side of the government that control the security apparatus, and also the state government that is helpless because they don't control, the security apparatus. Therefore, the locals are being left with no other option, is either to, defend themselves or to be part and parcel of these terrorists so that they can get protection. Well, so it's a kind of double-edged sword.
Well, you told Maokwe the other time that, the implications are very, very dire in the long run. Yeah. In order to avert an impending crisis, maybe within the next few months or few years, what needs to be done now to arrest the situation? Because just as you have said, there is a massive infiltration already. It would seem as if the communities have, they have earned the trust, or the Ansaru have earned the trust of the people, or the other way around. So how do we begin to reverse the narrative so that this impending crisis doesn't consume us?
Well, there is two ways to do this thing. One, there must be a kind of synergy between the security personnel and the locals in that place. Two, there must be a way in which to de-radicalize, the communities that have been cajoled to join this Ansaru of a thing. You understand? These are the two things to be done. If you look at what happened on a Salah day, that is during the end of Ramadan, the Ansaru came out in a community called Kuyelo, Old Kuyelo in Bernungwari local government, with their, in a full military regalia, on their bikes. The locals are hailing them. So because there is no presence of the, security personnel in those areas, or rather I can say that the security personnel in those areas cannot go to those parts of the place that the Ansaru are more dominant in that areas. And that is why these people, are being, hailed as heroes by the communities because they give them protection against abductions or kidnappings or even what, the armed bandits, the terrorist armed bandits are doing, to their communities, cattle rustling and what have you, and also kidnapping, innocent people.
It's like deja vu, right again, Mr. Abdurrauf.
Yes.
What we saw in the Northeast, we're now seeing that perhaps on an even wider and much dangerous scale in the Northwest region. That's a region that has been battling banditry, well, now terrorism, now another scale of it. But this is a bit tricky because there's a religious angle to it. You said earlier that, they come and try to, teach them, religion, rights, how to go about this the right way. So there's that one, which is a very tricky one, especially in Nigeria.
Well, how to, reach out to these people or to de-radicalize these people is simple. You see, first of all, we must have a kind of political will from the government to deal with the situation. Secondly, the strategy. We need to adopt a new strategy that we can be able, to see how all the security apparatus will work in synergy with each other, and also to involve, the locals. So once we have that, then we'll now address the situation. Number 3 is complicity among the locals. The informant. In this situation, the informants, play a very bad role in escalating the insecurity in those areas, particularly this part of Kaduna State that we have Ansaru in Berenungwari and Giwa local government areas. Number 4 is, after having that, we need to have a kind of, bringing the locals, the volunteers, you understand, who can now give information about, where these people are. Remember, if you look at the vast nature, the forest, the Kuyambana forest, the Kamuku forest, and to some extent, where I said that this forest that lies between Berenungwari, Katsina, and also Giwa local government area, that is, when you look at this vast forest, whereby you have large chunks of mechanized farm that are not being utilized by a company, and also some of these forests that, traverse from those areas of Giwa, Berenungwari, up to Rijana, and Katari, where the government is contemplating of, of relocating those society.
Pardon me, you can land on that point, sorry.
Yeah, so if we can have this kind of strategy, you understand, the political will on one hand, the strategy, the security apparatus, particularly, we need a complete strategy.
Okay.
And also galvanizing or bringing all the security apparatus in one hand, and also making the locals understand the implication of this, and also to re-radicalize those locals that already joined Ansaru.
Okay, let's take this to Mr. Abe now. I was going to add Akilibu to those communities, just Rijana, Kateri, and Akilibu. Those are the 3 communities that are being talked about on that axis, talking about relocation. But Mr. Abe, you've been in Kaduna State. This is a very messy situation that we have on our hands. Imagine people in communities having to trust terrorists to protect them from another form of terrorism, the armed bandits. And I know he's talked about, that's Mr. Our other guest, Mr. Abdurrauf, has talked about how you can de-radicalize them different ways, but the security angle. One part we don't usually talk about as much is, during that whole security report presentation, the government actually said about 101 of these terrorists, bandits, were neutralized by both the air and the land forces. So it would seem we have security presence. But when you hear that Ansaru terrorists actually have taken over an area, then it leaves, much questions there that where are the security operatives? As someone who knows that terrain as a commissioner of police, what do you think is at play here such that we have terrorists actually protecting communities against other terrorists?
Yeah, with due respect to the last speaker, he appears to have a broad knowledge of his environment, and which has made things easier for security agencies. A few days ago, I saw it in the news where the security agency stormed a Masop IPOP trading camp, and we are able to successfully eliminate the presence of their facilities. Now, we have a situation in the north where every information regarding the movement of these elements has been presented to us. We need to go in and overcome these situations. He was speaking as someone who has knowledge of the environment and believes that we did not know exactly that these people are coming in to become a problem to the communities. But at the security angle, we cannot claim that we do not know. That is why we have relevant agencies that present reports on the movements of these individuals into the state on a daily basis. The question is, these informations gathered are not actioned to gain the purpose for which the informations were gathered for. Honestly, I look at it as either failure from the security apparatus to be able to effectively curtail these situations. Time has come that we should stop doing the talking and sit down and act. We know exactly now, the governor has, in his last speech, told us exactly the seriousness of this situation. The community leader speaking now has presented a very clear picture and even locations of these people. We should go after them. Previously, like you said, when I was commissioner of police in Kaduna State, we had a different strategy. And I think if you were following up the crime trend then, it was working. We identified these locations and committed a lot of resources to this particular location because the locations have not changed. Along Kaduna, Abuja Road, it has not changed. The crime and criminality occurs in almost the same place. And we used to have a crime strategy that prevented these people from coming out through these particular areas. And if you are following up, you know that within those periods we are talking about, we have very, very minimal issue of crime in these locations. I think we should sit back and revolve a new way of stopping this crime from occurring in this area rather than trying to find a surface solution to it. Because if you ask the community to move, have you asked the criminals to leave? No. So I think we should revolve. We have been doing strategy between the police, the military, and all other security agencies before. But the situation, have we pushed it to a stage that we can achieve results? I think I would say no.
In solving the problem, Mr. Zubair, I'm coming to you now. In solving the problem, perhaps it will also be important, it's just as important that we understand the nature of the problem. You talked about de-radicalizing the people. But let's first understand the ideology of the Ansaru. Our guest on Sunrise Daily last week talked about how their ideology is not so clear, that they kidnapped, he referred to an incident where they kidnapped a French national, and in exchange for their release, the Ansaru demanded a change in the policy direction to favor Islam. Can you please articulate what you understand to be the ideology of the Ansaru? What alternative to Islam are they teaching the locals that they're recruiting into their fold?
Well, Ansaru, the one in Kaduna State, a splinter group of Boko Haram, which took over, the vast forest, particularly in the central part of Kaduna State, particularly in Birnungwari and Yuwa local government areas. You see, the ideology is simple. They are saying they are, in those areas as a kind of renaissance of Islam. But using an active way, or I can say they are using a coercive way of making their kind of ideology known to the people. For now, nobody knows the motives of this Ansaru, but you can see that the Ansaru that it derailed a train and also holding over 66 people. In a forest located, around whether between Birnungwari and Zamfara State. You see, these people, what they are saying is they want some of their people, to be released in exchange of those hostage. So therefore, de-radicalization in this part of thing is to make the locals understand that these people will not give you protection because you don't know what agenda they have or what kind of, what kind of motives they have against your people, because we don't know exactly now what kind of...
A bit clearer, do they advocate violence as an approach to adopt to achieve their goals? And is that the danger that Kaduna citizens should be worried about?
Yeah, at the moment, they are not advocating for any violence, but they are anti-state. So anything that has to do with the state, these people are antagonists of the state. So therefore, anything about government, these people are antagonists of that. You understand, if some people are antagonists of government or anything that has to do with the normal way of running a government, then you know that these people are more or less more dangerous in the long run than it is either the government now, with the help of the locals, particularly the community leaders, to sit down and iron out a kind of plan. One, to now de-radicalize the place and also to give security to these people. Because these people are vulnerable.
Yes, one can only wonder, Mr. Abdurrauf, how quickly that response will come from all sides of governments, whether at the federal or at the state level, because just as you have said, the danger is right there in our faces and time is ticking very, very fast. Add to that mix, the elections are ahead of us. But for now, we have to thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation. Agiole Abe is a retired Commissioner of Police and former Commissioner of Police in Kaduna State, as well as Pioneer Commandant, Mobile Force Training College, Ilara in Osun State, and former Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations in Anambra, as well as Zubair Abdurrauf, who is a community leader in Birnungwari, Kaduna State, and former MD CEO, Kaduna State Media Corporation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today. Well, just to quickly mention that we indeed expected Ikenga Tochukwu, who is Police PRO, Anambra State Police Command, and Deputy Superintendent of Police to join us, but hopefully that will be in subsequent episodes. For now, we'll take a short break, and when we return, it's time to talk some development. Stay with us.
Well, some 11 years ago, there was a huge controversy. I mean, let's throw back to what Ayo and Kayode were talking about, a federation and who's the federal government, etc., etc. There was a big controversy over whether or not the federal government should be saving money on behalf of the states. And that was as a result of calls for scrap of the excess crude account. That call, that controversy at that time yielded something which was quite instructive. It gave birth to the NSIA, that's a National Sovereign Investment Fund. Then a lot of the states signed up and the federal government signed up to invest in $1 billion initially in 2011. That was when the act was signed into law. And in 2012, the NSIA kicked off effectively. This is at least 11, 12 years down the line, and they have posted their how many years of consecutive profits. Well, we have the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority to tell us more about that this morning. Mr. Uche Oji is the Managing Director and the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, the NSIA. I think I mixed up the words. I think I said something about fund.
That's fine.
Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So how many years down the line, and this is where we currently are, we understand that the NSIA has posted at least 9 years of consecutive profits.
Correct.
How much can we say that we have gained from the initial 1 billion, which was put in the kitty?
Okay, yes. So let's contextualize a few things. First, this is NSIA's 10th year of existence and is 9th year of profits, right? So 2021 for us was a very decent year. Although last time I appeared on this show, I did say it will not be as strong as 2020, which I believe was a blockbuster year for us. Many things went right for 2020.
Interesting about that. I mean, we'll come to the different years and the different challenges that you've had, but let's signpost the fact that 2020 was also the COVID year.
Correct.
So, I mean, if you say that it was a blockbuster year for you, there'll be questions to ask about how you went, went about that. But in all, when you look at an overview, $1 billion saved on behalf of the Federation, not the federal government, saved on behalf of the Federation in 2011 or 2012.
Yes.
And how much do we have in the kitty?
Correct. No, very simple. So 1 billion was initial contribution. A further 600 million was put in. Actually, it was 750. They withdrew 150 for COVID, if you remember that. And today, if I use the exchange rate of 416, which is 411, which is really what we use, the official rate, we are currently at $2.3 billion.
$2.3 billion.
Correct.
This is important because at that time, there were lots of questions. I mean, the controversy was so big. States said we could save by ourselves. We don't need the federal government to do it for us. And that $1 billion was a huge compromise on talking about the state. So one can only imagine if we had saved a lot more at that time and, what we most possibly would have in the kitty. But now tell us the how. How do you break it down? How were we able to achieve this much within such a time frame despite the headwinds we've seen internationally?
Of course. So 3 things. The first is the NSIA, the fund itself is actually 3 different funds. So there's a Future Generations Fund, which is a fund that is largely invested internationally. So we invest in public markets, private equity, venture capital, all the alternative assets. And I think at the last count, we invested across more than 12 countries. Assets, so United States, Europe, Japan, China, all of that, including some in Nigeria. So that's the first fund, and that's the fund that actually delivered a lot of the returns for us. If you remember, 2020 was a very strong year for the global financial markets. And the reason was very simple. Yes, it was COVID, but people were getting paid. They were sitting at home. They were not spending. So all that money went to the capital markets. We saw that coming as a trend, and we actually reallocated our assets and put more in public markets in the US and in Europe. And that helped us make the returns of 2020 and some of the 2021 returns as well. The second fund is a stabilization fund. Now, this fund is almost like a checking account. It's a fund that we're required to write a check for the government in times of economic stress based on demonstrating need. And that was what happened in 2020. COVID, government needed $150 million. And through the process of the law, they came to us and were able to provide that money. That fund does not generate huge returns at all because almost like checking account.
Yes, stabilization
7 days we must be able to provide the cash.
What percentage of the savings?
20% is in
stabilization
correct.
Okay.
And 40% is in Future Generations Fund.
Okay.
Then the third fund is the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. Now, this is the fund that's locally focused. And this is a fund that's invested in agriculture, in healthcare, in roads, in power, in financial markets infrastructure, as we call them. Many people haven't quite realized NSI was a pioneer investor that delivered things like family homes funds, Nigeria Mortgage Financing Company, Development Bank of Nigeria, Infra Credits. These are all NSIA either developed or sponsored entities. So that fund also invests in those. And then we're also building what we call gas industrialization strategy. I think this show a year or 2 years ago We talked about building an ammonia and diammonium phosphate plant with OCP of Morocco. So this fund does the local infrastructure. You know, I mean, local infrastructure, you're exposed to the currency challenges. Infrastructure is long gestation. It takes a long time before they start making money. So really, the bulk of our returns have come from what we've done through some of our international investing and some of the things we've done locally as well.
The third basket you called?
The Nigeria Infrastructure Fund.
The Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. I know that you've been in charge of the second Niger bridge for quite a while, and I know that it's nearing completion. Perhaps you speak a little more to that. But
sure.
Let me flip this to my colleagues in Lagos. I hope you guys are not going to start that conversation about federation and federal government.
We're always in that discussion as well.
Well, we'll try not to, at least for now. But I'm quite interested about the infrastructure fund, and I know Markwe was going to go into that, so maybe we should just talk about it, because, you know, the insecurity we're seeing has been linked to, you know, the economy and the poor indices we're seeing from poverty rates and all that. And it's also been linked to infrastructure deficits, you know, lack of good roads, hospitals, and all of that. I'm quite interested in that infrastructure fund, because the president had said earlier, I think it was last year, that we'll need about how much? $1.5 trillion to sort infrastructure in Nigeria. And I did calculation, and I realized that that's like 30-something 2022 budget size, you know, 17 trillion times 30-something. And that's even, I mean, we're doing budget deficit financing, so it's not like we're making all that money anyway. But help us understand. You said we have about $2.3 billion now, so that's quite like ×2 where we started. Just how much of that are you biting? How much of that $1.7 trillion can we tackle from the infrastructure fund that we have? Because clearly we have a huge deficit.
Sure. Sure. No, completely understood. Now, there are two things I probably also want to add. The 2.3 is NSI's core assets, okay? NSI's core assets. The NSI in its role also manages two other vehicles for the government. We manage what we call the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund. And so far, the commitment into that fund, and when it's fully funded, will be about under $1.7 billion. So we could be looking at total assets, core NSIA and under administration, on behalf of third parties like the federal government, of closer to 3.5 to 4 billion. That is, if you add those. We don't add those in our accounts. The accounts published this morning doesn't include those because we manage those on behalf of the government. So what the government has done is to say, look, NSIA, you've proven that you can manage some infrastructure. How about we set up some vehicles for you to manage for us and use that to develop in those roads? And you also, as NSIA, can invest in those. And so that's the fund that is tackling Lagos-Ibadan Second Niger Bridge and Abuja-Kano Road. And we are actually not anywhere close to addressing the broad base of infrastructure deficits. But we are focused on addressing infrastructure that is commercial, not social, right? So commercial means infrastructure where we can earn money. So the roads, for example, will be tolled. And so we're taking a piece of that. Healthcare also, we've been very active in healthcare. We invested 2 years ago and developed 3 years ago, developed two types of centers. One was an oncology center in Lagos, which recently is now become break-even and is starting to turn a profit. We are now going on one step further now to roll out 23 healthcare programs across the country, including a center for advanced medicine here in Abuja, as well as other oncology centers, renal centers, diagnostic centers across the country. So we're taking a piece of this, which is healthcare, and making a significant impact there. On the roads, for a while, I think when we come on this show, people were doubtful whether the Second Niger Bridge was actually a reality or not. You've seen that now. You know, it's almost there, almost there. Before the end of this year, I'm sure the phase 1 will be completed, and maybe early next year or late this year, it will be usable. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, we're still struggling with that, but we've made some substantial progress on that. I think we're somewhere close to 80% complete or 83% complete. Abuja-Kano Road, we're struggling there, but we've made progress on the Kaduna, Zaria, Kano, and that's almost done. Abuja-Kaduna is where we really need to make some significant progress. So in terms of overall, the areas of focus for us, and I think this is important, we're in roads, we're in power, we've started construction on a 10-megawatt solar power plant in Kano. We are also looking at a few things in hydro, as well as gas-fired power plants, especially the ones that the government have abandoned. We're looking to revive those. Agriculture, we have been managing the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative for the last 5 years. And I'm actually glad to announce that last year, 2021, that program turned a profit of about 10 billion naira. Now, it might sound small, but just think about the fact that this has been a big deficit for the government for as long as we can remember. It's been subsidy-driven.
Okay.
But we've managed to commercialize it and turn it into something that was actually a profit center.
Well,
and we're very proud of that. Other areas, and I'll just stop here because I know I'm rattling off a number of things. Yeah. But you're seeing us in financial markets, in infrastructure. You're seeing us in, I've mentioned healthcare. You're also now seeing us, I believe, in technology, which is an area where we've made some recent investments.
Well, I'm going to, if you don't mind me putting you on the stand right now and saying you have to commit to coming again, because there are too many questions that we would love to ask you, which we may not be able to get to today. But you said something earlier when Malcolm was tossing to us here in Lagos that, you know, you're struggling with the federal government thing as well. If you can quickly speak to that, because I know, I mean, you said it previously that there have been some struggles with some states. How is that going so far? What are the negotiations that need to take place that have not taken place? And how do we ensure that it doesn't get in the way of what you're doing?
No. Actually, I think we've made a significant progress on those. In the early days of the NSIA, and you were all part of that, you watched it play out, it was controversial. Actually, it was deeply controversial. And it was sad that we lost opportunity in the period of that controversy, because that was when we could have put a substantial amount of money into the NSIA, which, if the market had played out the way it's played out now, will have amounted to something really significant for the nation. Let me put in perspective for you. In 2012, when the NSIA started, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund was putting $1 billion a week into their Sovereign Wealth Fund, a week. We didn't put anything, apart from the initial $1 billion. It was in 2015. 2016 was the first time that we now got some $250 million contribution. So sovereign wealth funds are about contribution, and the controversy that was in the early stages, unfortunately, hobbled the organization from getting the right size of contribution. Obviously, today, all of that is resolved. We are working very, very well with the governors, working very well with the federal government and the local governments. Let me put in another number for you. The NSIA is owned 48% by the federal government and 52% by the states and local government. Every single local government, every state have a certificate of contribution. So when we make a profit, we divide it across everybody. So when you think about the NSIA, our shareholders is 774 local government, 36 states, FCT, area councils, and the federal government. And so in our dealings, and where the controversy tends to come in is, you know, in terms of dealing with legislators, the federal legislature, the state legislature, and all that. But it's all about stakeholder management. These are our shareholders. We treat all of them with the respect that shareholders command. But it's a long list of shareholders. So when I talk about the federal government versus federation thing, our struggle has evolved. It had been very difficult at the beginning, but now it really is about ensuring that we're able to make an impact across all our stakeholder groups. We do not have enough money for that, but we'll get there eventually, I hope.
Do you think that there could ever be a way that more Nigerians, I mean, this is a state thing now.
Yes.
But do you see a window, maybe a special basket or something, that Nigerians, everyday Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians could, through that, invest in the NSIA?
No, short answer, no. It will be difficult, and the reason is because we're not licensed to manage money for individuals. Anybody who's going to do that will have to get an SEC license. We're only authorized by law to manage money for the state, federal, and local governments. Okay, and so I think that's a very short answer to that.
What about the states? Because part of the controversy
Yes.
then was that, you know, the federal government was the one who had access to the excess crude account.
Correct.
Assuming the states, you know, some states thought, oh, we need some money from the money we have put into the NSIA. Could they get access to it?
It would not be advisable to do so. You can't continue to eat your seed. That's just why you never grow, right? How much are we even talking about versus our budget, versus our potential as a country?
I'm just painting a scenario. However,
I agree.
However little, I mean, you've seen a lot of states and how, you know, or maybe they say we want to put it in infrastructure. Just saying, maybe there's a particular project they'd like to invest in and they don't have the funds. Could they unilaterally say, we're going to approach the NSIA and we'll be asking for funds from them?
No, they don't ask for funds from us. They ask for co-investments with us.
Okay.
And that is encouraged, by the way. So we've had some states come and say, listen, we would like to do X, Y, Z in healthcare, we'd like to do X, Y, Z in roads, we'd like to do this in power. Can you collaborate with us? And listen, the federal government doesn't really own any land apart from the FCT, right? Mm-hmm. So all the investments that we are making, and we haven't had no footprint in the FCT, by the way, except this hospital we're planning now. All these investments are in states. Our cancer center, and I thank God for that cancer center, was built in Lagos, right? It's in Louth, inside Louth. During COVID, that center saved people's lives. We had 5,000 unique patients with 150,000 therapists, radio and chemo, in that center. These people used to go to Dubai, used to go to Europe for treatment, but they couldn't go anymore. And we were charging less than 20% of what they would have paid in those countries for what is close to equivalent level of treatment. So, but it's not in the sky, it's in Lagos State, right? Kano, we're building a power plant. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is cut across 3 states. Second Niger Bridge is 2 states, it's Delta State, Anambra State. So over time, I think the problem is that the size of the fund is still not big enough to cover as many places as it should. Mm. If it was 10 times the size of what it should be now, which it was envisaged to have been in 2012, it will make a significant level of impact. But we missed that opportunity and we're here, but we'll get there.
Well, one more question to ask the aspirants and perhaps the candidates when eventually they take on the hat. What's their plan for the NSIA? But we have to thank you so much for coming on this morning. As my colleague did say, it will be wonderful to have you back again to take on the plethora of questions that we have for you. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. Thank you for having me. Mr. Uche Orji is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. We're totally out of time now. Maybe that's my fault. We have a number of emails, but hopefully we'll be able to take them subsequently. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Kayode Okikere.
I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Have a wonderful day.